Now it's time for today's perspective, and we hear all too often alarm that the rainforest is being chopped down. But by how much? Well, it is in fact an area of the rainforest the size of a football pitch every single 6 seconds, or over a year. Well, that's an area larger than the whole of the United Kingdom. Those figures, according to the Forest 500 report put together by the environmental charity Global Canopy. It's called Forest 500 as it actually lists the major world companies that the charity says are behind tropical deforestation, much of it to grow products such as soy, palm oil, timber, or cows to provide beef. Well, Executive Director of Global Canopy, Niki Mardas, joins us now on the programme. Thanks very much for being with us. Just tell us, first of all, from the company's point of view, why these products are so necessary, if you like, and why it is that the rainforest is what's coming down to make way for them.
Hi, Stuart. Well, thank you so much for having me on the programme. And yes, these products that you mentioned, these commodities, palm oil, soy, beef, they are driving 2/3 of deforestation worldwide, the great majority. They are baked into our system of finance and trade. They are in 50% of the products in our supermarkets. They're in our investments. They're in our pensions. There's really no getting away from these products. And the rainforest is coming down because that's where there's room to expand. And the tragedy, the irony, is that there's no need for this to happen. We have enough land to produce these products sustainably, but of course it's more expensive. And our economy at the moment relies on this, if you like, open land, and it doesn't factor in the huge environmental costs of taking these actions. You know, deforestation drives climate change, it drives biodiversity loss and extinctions. And of course, it harms local people, undermining their rights, their livelihoods, as we've seen all too often.
So these companies that you're naming and shaming, if you like, I mean, do you think they're deliberately going out there, if you like, and targeting the rainforest? Or do you think they're just turning a blind eye to people who are producing these products?
So the 500 companies that we're looking at, we have chosen because they have the largest influence on deforestation, the largest use of these products in their supply chains or in their investments. So we're really looking at the big guys. These are all very large companies. But the truth is that most of these companies are very far from the forest. They're far from that front line where the deforestation is happening. And in a sense, that's why this problem has been able to continue, because there hasn't been transparency of these very complex supply chains. So often it's unknowingly. The truth is this issue's been on the table for many, many years now. And these companies really need to take action in understanding how they're linked to deforestation through their suppliers, and on it goes. So it's complicated, but it's a critical issue. And there's no question that at the end of the day, these companies bear responsibility, joint responsibility, as do we all as consumers of these products.
You do mention in the report, don't you, that some companies are trying. I mean, you mentioned, for example, H&M saying that they don't source leather from Brazil anymore unless they can be certain it isn't contributing to deforestation. I mean, it's the kind of issue, isn't it, that we hear more and more about. I mean, do you think gradually companies are understanding what they're doing wrong, or are there still companies out there who just don't care?
Well, one of the findings of our report is that there are many companies that, as you say, just don't care, or at least we can't discern that they are taking this issue seriously, because we look at their public policies, the way they report on these issues, and whether or not they're being good corporate citizens on this critical question of deforestation. And you get the irony that you have some companies that say we're leading on climate change. Climate change is a critical issue which we're addressing with our targets, and yet they ignore deforestation, which is driving so much of the carbon emissions that are contributing to this problem. So yes, these companies are, I think, 1/3 of companies out of the biggest 500 that we survey have no policies in place at all. And indeed, one of the key findings of the report when we look at finance, global finance, the situation is even worse, with some 2/3 of the 150 major financial institutions worldwide that we look at having no policies in place. They provide $2.7 trillion in financing to companies at high risk. So we've got a big problem here.
And what about international efforts? I mean, there have been all sorts of international efforts, haven't there, to try and protect and save the rainforest. But time and time again, we've seen targets missed or just completely avoided, haven't we?
We have seen targets missed, although there seems to be a political hardening of resolve and will. Of course, the politics of the United States give some hope that the world's biggest economy will come back to the table on this issue. Look, we've got big summits at the end of this year on climate change in Glasgow, but also critically on nature. We're facing a nature crisis as well as a climate crisis, and of course they're intertwined. So there is an opportunity at the end of this year for governments to come together and take common action, and we should take some encouragement that there are practical measures being discussed at the level of the European Union, at the level of the UK, to put in laws which will require these companies to do a due diligence on their suppliers to ensure that they're not driving deforestation overseas and inadvertently or knowingly causing these terrible harms. And France has been a leader in this area, setting laws that have helped to show the way.
And Niki, I noticed earlier on you mentioned us. I'm talking about the consumers here. I mean, presumably it's also up to us to start putting pressure on these companies and start changing our habits as well.
That's right, Stuart. I mean, I think you've really put your finger on it with the point about pressure. We obviously all need to change our own behaviors. There are many things that we can do as individuals, but in a sense, it's our power as citizens, it's our power as customers of some of these very big companies, it's our power as holders of bank accounts and of pensions with our money to say to these companies that, not in our name, we don't want our money to be funding deforestation. And a very powerful thing that all of us can do is call up our banks and ask them that question: is my money driving deforestation? I'd really recommend that we all do that, because it's through that kind of pressure that we'll see change.
Niki Mardas, great to talk to you on the programme today. That's Niki Mardas there, joining us from the company Global Canopy.